Missions Advocates. This is globalcastresources.com.
Today we have the privilege of hanging out with Brad. Welcome to Globalcast.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good.
Thanks so much for investing here in the students and SOSM.
It's been a joy.
We just would love to hear a little bit of what's on your heart. I know there's an incredible dynamic at work in the world, and you're right in the middle of that. And if you could help us understand that and even our role in it, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, the work that I do with YWAM is with YWAM Chicago, and so we've been in that city for about 18 years. Primarily, the vision that God has formulated for us is to try and harness in some capacity the gift of the city.
Yeah.
So there's really a phenomenon going on right now because urbanization is at a rate that far surpasses anything we've seen in human history.
Right.
So what we've been trying to understand is the significance of that,
right,
and how we can harness that.
Right.
Really.
So this is never before in history has everybody been moving to the city at such a rate.
Right. In other words, predominantly for the entire span of human history, the world has been a rural culture.
Okay.
100 years ago, 29% of the global population was in cities.
Wow.
So for the entire span of human history, we produced 29% of our populace by the turn of the 1900s to live in cities. And even at that time, there was only about 5 cities in the world which had close to about 1 million people in them.
Right.
So in 1 century, we go from 29% urban to now over 50% urban. So we are now the first urban generation in human history.
Incredible.
And actually, according to National Geographic, by the end of this century, if we just continue to urbanize at the rate we're at right now, the world will be 90% urbanized by the end of this century. So for the entire span of human history, we're a rural culture.
90%.
And in 2 centuries, we'll become 90% urbanized. In other words, we're not going backwards. We're urbanizing at a rate that no one could have planned for.
Right.
So where 100 years ago we have 5 cities that have 1 million people in them.
Right.
Today you have over 700 cities with at least 1 million in them. And now we have cities we call agglomerations like Tokyo, which are as much as 36 million people. These are cities that have grown so large they're now engulfing all the surrounding cities.
Okay.
So it's a phenomenon. According to National Geographic, it's literally being classified as a world crisis, right up there with the loss of fresh water supply, poverty, and mutation of diseases. I mean, the world does not know how to handle this. It's an absolute phenomenon.
It's a crisis in what regards now?
Well, it's a crisis from the world's perspective. It's a crisis because we can't build infrastructure fast enough to handle that. In other words, you have some cities where it's estimated in the greater Mexico City area, there's as many as 1 million people moving into that area every year. That's 80,000 a month. So if you're trying to build infrastructure for that, it's an impossibility.
Right.
And so what it's creating, this urbanization phenomenon is creating levels of poverty we've never seen before. It's creating levels of just brokenness of humanity and infrastructure difficulties of dealing with that. And so from the world's perspective, it's a crisis. There's really not an answer for that. What we've begun to try and ask God is, how does this fit into the history of missions? Because God's a missionary God. God is wielding history towards a goal.
Exactly.
So God's
great question. Thanks for asking it.
God's not taken back by this.
Right.
So our question has always been, as the missionary God, what are you doing through urbanization? And so as we've really sought the Lord on that, we've begun to see the gifts of the city. Yes, the city does create incredible challenges. We can't underestimate that. At the same time, it creates opportunities for world evangelism like the church has never been afforded. Yeah. And so we need to harness that aspect of it.
Yeah.
That gift of the city, really.
So many times the nations are coming to us where we in the cities.
Exactly. So if you take Chicago, for example, which is just an example of the urbanization phenomenon worldwide. Right. Chicago has about 9 million people now in the greater Chicago area, but there are 200 different nationalities in that populace.
200 nations, biblically speaking, in that one.
Right. So not necessarily, obviously, ethnic or people groups, but nations represented there. Right. Now, in the area where the Youth and the Mission Center is at, we live in a part of the city that's a 5-mile radius of the city. And in that pocket, there's 350,000 people, and 1 out of 3 are foreign born, and it's 150 different nations.
1 out of 3.
1 out of 3. 150 nations in a 5-mile radius. I can walk around that. In other words, to give you a picture of that, the high school down the street from our ministry center has 53 different languages spoken natively by the students in that high school.
Yeah.
So this is diversity like we've never seen before, literally right outside our front door. And so half the work's being done for us. These are not just Western Hemisphere peoples migrating from the Southern Hemisphere to the North.
No.
These are unreached peoples. As a matter of fact, in Chicago, we have 60,000 new immigrants every year. Okay, that's 170 every day moving into my city. Now, out of that 170 a day, 80 of them are from 1040 window or the least evangelized nations of the world.
Yes.
So this is literally bringing unreached peoples into reachable environments.
Exactly.
So this is a gift to the church.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If we can see it.
If we can see it and harness it.
Are you seeing people seeing it?
We're seeing people. We host a lot of teams.
Good.
We work with a lot of churches. We mobilize efforts to educate the church. We've done even things like many people are familiar with the prayer through the window guides, where you identify unreached people groups and we're praying for them daily.
Right.
We've developed guides like that for our city, where literally you can take a 31-day prayer guide for Chicago, and you're praying through the 31 least evangelized nations of the world in Chicago. And what this is doing is we're trying to educate the church that there are whole neighborhoods at your back door that we can reach.
That's incredible.
It's a gift.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And I know a little bit about your ministry to know that you actually are not only reaching the people that come, but you're actually seeing them challenged to take on their own inheritance in the nations.
Right. Because God's concerned about the redemption of the nations. So our goal has been to not only try and develop cross-cultural ministry that could reach into the homes of all these immigrants that are coming to us. And many of them, you got to understand, when they come, they're doing half the work for you. They want to learn your language. They want to understand at least enough of the culture to survive. They want relationship. And so these are people where we would be doing most of that work if we went to their countries. They're doing half of it for us. And so we not only are trying to build those relationships, build bridges into those cultures, but once we see them being discipled, and now you have ethnic churches that are popping up in every mega city in Western culture. So now we can disciple them also in mission. Here's the amazing thing, because when they come out of their isolated locations into urban environments, which, by the way, this is not just a Western phenomenon. In other words, the world is urbanizing at a faster rate in the developing world. Right now in the developing world, it's urbanizing 2 to 3 times its population growth annually, which means that they're literally, when you're talking about Asian cities or in China or India or even in Africa, they're tripling the size of their city every 25 years. Okay, this means a city like Shanghai, China could have been 6.57 million people in 1985. It's now 20 million people or 22 million people. You see, so they're urbanizing far faster than the West did. Well, the same phenomenon is happening there, because these rural population groups, which are the unreached, are moving to the cities for education, for advancement. They're getting resourced. This is the nature of the city. The city resources you.
Yes.
And so they're also reaching a state where they could actually, for the first time, dream about taking the gospel somewhere else. So this is what we're doing in Chicago. We've been working with ethnic churches and working in different ethnic neighborhoods. We've actually had a specific focus with Asian Indians for the last several years. Many of these are now second-generation immigrants. Some of them are still first-generation, but they're now educated. They now have jobs. They now have, in a sense, they're experiencing some of the prosperity that can come by the machine of the city. But what's happening now is they get discipled. They start to dream for the first time as a people that has never been necessarily a mission-sending people. They're now dreaming about the idea that as an Indian, they have a calling to the nations.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so for the last 6 years, each year we've been taking mission trips from Chicago that are all Indian teams.
Incredible.
And so we've been going to places like Uganda or South America or Haiti or even India. And when they arrive, they're teams of 15, 20 Indians, and people say, "Where are you from?" And they say, we're from Chicago. So it's a phenomenon. It's a fascinating phenomenon.
Absolutely.
So you have an all-Indian team coming from a Western city and dreaming about doing missions for the first time. Some of those now are actually in full-time ministry after just doing missions with us.
Right.
So these, I believe, are gifts of the city. I think we need to harness
I
them.
love that. You just seem to have captured the picture of all the potential of these things and connecting these dots.
Yeah.
Is there ways that people can give, pray, come, work, join?
Right. Yeah, well,
because I know that there's going to be folks say, this is cool.
Yeah, we're always welcoming teams, and so people can visit ywamchicago.org and find out how to come as a team.
Yeah,
our city is full of these neighborhoods that are all immigrant neighborhoods, and we develop strategic ways of building bridges cross-culturally. We're very cross-culturally sensitive, but we believe that we can train the church to do the same thing in a city that they could do in another country.
And
Absolutely.
And they have to.
They have to.
Yeah.
They're going to have to still be cross-culturally sensitive. They're going to have to build bridges. They're going to have to do all that we do in other countries. We now have to do it in our own country. But the potentials are amazing if we'll do that. And so definitely we welcome teams. Anybody that wants to contact us would be great.
Wonderful, wonderful. I just really appreciate you taking the time to open our eyes to this dynamic that's happening. It's going to affect all of us.
Yeah,
it is affecting all of us, and we have to adjust our strategies to take this into account.
Yeah, definitely.
The whole church bringing the whole gospel to the whole world. This is globalcastresources.com.